News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Denise Pellegrini. Investors watching very closely as Boeing, as we've been talking about, braces for a strike at its St. Louis area defense factories after union members rejected the company's modified contract offer. Bloomberg's Julie Johnson says more than 3,000 will be off the job as of midnight at one of Boeing's key businesses.
Boeing Defense and Space has built fighter jets in St. Louis for a very long time. They also support some of the commercial jet programs out of there, but it's primarily military aircraft. And munitions and missiles are also built there.
The union last went on strike in 1996. The Defense and Space Division generated about 30% of Boeing's revenue in the second quarter. OPEC Plus has agreed to add 547,000 barrels a day of oil to production next month. Bloomberg's Grant Smith calls it an indication that OPEC Plus members are focusing on market share over higher prices.
They have been prepared to let prices fall to levels of $60 a barrel or lower, which in previous years they would have aggressively defended. So it's very much an indication that they are willing to let the market weaken in order to claim back that market share. In the process, Saudi Arabia and some of the Gulf countries are showing that they are willing to give President Donald Trump some of what he's looking for in terms of keeping fuel prices under control.
And Smith also says the group has scheduled a follow-up meeting for September 7 and plans to look at removing another layer of production halts of about 1.66 million barrels of crude oil. Former Special Counsel Jack Smith under the microscope. The Office of the Special Counsel launching an investigation into Smith for possible violation of the Hatch Act on political activity. The investigation requested by Arkansas Republican Senator Tom Cotton. Smith was appointed to investigate President Trump's alleged efforts to subvert the 2020 election and alleged mishandling of classified documents. Both cases investigated by Smith resulted in criminal charges against President Trump, but those cases were closed after he was reelected. President Trump, meantime, last month accused former President Obama of treason, with investigations apparently underway into several former employees who worked under the Obama administration. Eric Holder, former U.S. Attorney General under Obama, says he thinks he knows why the Trump administration is doing this.
This is a weaponization of the Justice Department and the law enforcement capacities of the federal government. It's also an attempt to deflect attention from that which really afflicts the president and his administration right now, which is the release of the Epstein files.
And Holder on ABC's This Week, calling for release of investigative files in possession of the Justice Department and the FBI. President Trump lashing out at the jobs data, that jobs report we got on Friday, including weaker than expected numbers and downward revisions of the May and June jobs data as well. He fired the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, claiming she fudged the numbers. Kevin Hassett, director of the White House Economic Council, says when he saw the jobs report, especially those downward revisions of previous months, he thought it was a typo.
I've been following these numbers all the way back when I worked with Alan Greenspan for something like 40 years, and I've never seen revisions like this.
And Hassett on NBC's Meet the Press. President Trump calling Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell a stubborn moron this past week for not lowering interest rates, part of his months-long campaign against central bank. And former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers says he thinks he knows why President Trump is pressuring Fed Chair Powell in public.
What the president is doing is recognizing that for all kinds of reasons, of which his policies are very important ones, the economy's at a lot of risk, and he's looking to set up a scapegoat if the economy performs badly.
And Summers on ABC's This Week. Meantime, President Trump has a chance to pick a new Fed governor because Ariana Kugler says she's resigning. President Trump could name someone to the board who he hopes to eventually have replace Powell. Bank of America CEO Brian Moynihan says following Friday's disappointing numbers on unemployment, his bank's economists still expect there to be no Fed interest rate cuts this year and no recession.
What they believe is sort of in the middle of next year, the Fed will start cutting and bring the Fed funds rate closer to what would be a more normal rate around 3%.
And Moynihan there on CBS Face the Nation. Operating profit falling at Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway in the last quarter. Berkshire also writing down the value of its stake in Kraft Heinz. Buffett's cash pile ended up dropping 1%, the first time in 3 years. The war chest has shrunk. And Bloomberg's Alex Rajbandari also says President Trump's new tax and spend law recently passed will eventually have a negative effect on one of Warren Buffett's businesses.
As the company is assessing its impact on the energy business, because that piece of the legislature is phasing out clean investments, and the company says it might have an impact on BHE in the long term, so they're kind of evaluating that.
Bloomberg's Alex Rajbandari. Investors also looking ahead to quarterly results this coming week on some consumer-facing stocks. McDonald's, Walt Disney, and Airbnb all reporting. Stocks tumbled Friday on tariff worries and that weaker-than-expected jobs report. President Trump's new tariffs do go into effect August 7. Average tariffs on U.S. imports, 15%. Final level on tariffs on goods from China still up in the air. Canada's trade minister says he remains optimistic about trade talks with the U.S. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Denise Pellegrini. This is Bloomberg.